She was only 8 years old when she vanished from her own backyard. No footprints, no broken fence, no sound, just silence that swallowed her whole. For 9 years, there was nothing but unanswered questions and fading hope, until one rainy morning, a girl walked into a police station holding a crumpled missing poster, a brass tag stamped with the number 52, and a voice that trembled as she said her name was Lily Bennett. The room froze. The air shifted. And in that moment, everyone knew nothing about this case was what it seemed. What happened to Lily Bennett during those 9 silent years? Who was the man she claimed had taken her, and why did she say she could only speak now because he was dead? If you want to uncover the answers to these questions and step deeper into the chilling mystery of Lily Bennett, then like this video and subscribe to Unscripted Tales. Help us reach 1,000 likes because it is a promise I made to my mother, and tonight, I want to keep that promise with your support. The rain had only just stopped when Detective Sarah Whitmore entered the Blue Ridge police station at dawn. The streets outside were slick, glistening beneath dim orange street lamps. A stop sign at the corner creaked in the wind, its bolts whining softly, and the smell of wet asphalt clung to the morning air. Inside, the hum of fluorescent lights mixed with the stale scent of burnt coffee that Sarah had stopped noticing years ago. She passed the faded corkboard on the lobby wall, the one lined with missing persons reports, edges curled and yellowed with age. But there, at the center, framed as though it was sacred, hung the laminated poster of Lily Bennett. 8 years old. Missing since September 28, 2014. Blue eyes, brown hair to her shoulders, and a wide laugh caught mid-motion, chalk smeared across her shirt. Sarah stared at it as she always did, but this time, before she could move on, she saw something through the glass doors. A figure stood on the sidewalk, motionless in the mist. Sarah's breath caught as she stepped closer. It was a girl, soaked through by the rain, pale and thin in a maroon hoodie that clung to her small frame. She did not knock. She did not wave. She only stared through the glass. Slowly, Sarah pushed open the door. The girl raised her chin. Her hollow eyes looked older than her face. Without a word, she reached into her pocket and held out a damp piece of paper. It was a photocopy of Lily Bennett's missing poster. Her voice cracked when she spoke, as though it had forgotten how to form words. "My name is Lily Bennett. I think I was taken." Sarah stood frozen. The rain tapped softly on the awning above as the station behind her seemed to fall silent. For 9 years, this girl had been nothing but a photograph and a memory. Now, she was standing right here, and she was not alone. Sarah guided the girl inside, her wet shoes squeaking softly against the tile floor. The early morning silence of the station felt heavier now, every sound echoing too loud. The girl sat down slowly in the lobby chair, her fingers trembling as she held the brass tag tight against her palm, like it was the only thing keeping her anchored. Sarah crouched down in front of her, her voice low and careful, asking her name again. The girl whispered, "Lily Bennett." Hearing it out loud felt like the world had tilted. They led Lily to an interview room, a cold space with blank walls and a metal table. She sat with her hands folded neatly, staring at them like she was waiting for permission to move. When an officer offered her water, she flinched and shook her head. Her voice was faint but steady when she said she would only speak to Sarah. By 7:12 a.m., Hannah Bennett, Lily's mother, arrived. She burst through the station doors, her breath ragged, hair damp from the rain, mascara streaked down her face. She was trembling so hard she could barely hold herself upright. When she saw Lily through the glass, she stopped, her hand gripping the wall for balance. "That is her. That is my little girl." She rushed into the room, but Lily did not move. She did not lift her head or open her arms. Hannah knelt beside her, sobbing, reaching out to touch her daughter's face, but Lily only turned slightly away, her gaze fixed on her folded hands. The room was filled with the sound of Hannah crying, loud and raw, while Lily sat perfectly still, silent, like her mind was somewhere far away. Sarah watched from behind the glass. Something about the way Lily stared at her hands unsettled her, as if she was focusing on something no one else could see. When the brass tag was taken from her waistband and placed into an evidence bag, Lily's shoulders stiffened. Her fists closed so tight her knuckles went white. When the room finally emptied and it was just Sarah and Lily, the girl lifted her head for the first time. Her voice was quiet but clear. "I can talk now because he is dead." Sarah leaned forward, her heart pounding. She asked who he was. Lily's pale eyes did not blink. "My Uncle Mark." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Mark Hale had been dead for 5 years. He died in a fire that burned a hunting cabin down to its foundation. His body had been so badly charred it was barely identifiable. For years, it was assumed he had been nothing more than a troubled drifter, someone who came and went. But now, staring at Lily, Sarah felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Lily's next words were worse. He was not alone. The air in the room seemed to still as Lily glanced toward the mirror. Her voice fell even lower, almost a whisper. There were others. What did Lily mean by others, and how deep did this secret go? Sarah felt the room grow colder. Lily's voice was flat, calm in a way that made it even more unsettling. She kept her hands folded neatly on the table, her gaze distant, like she was looking through the wall and into a memory she could not escape. "Uncle Mark was not my uncle," Lily said. "He told me to call him that, but he was never family." Sarah pressed gently, asking what she remembered. Lily hesitated for a moment, then began speaking in fragments, like each word cost her something. She remembered his visits. He came to their house 2 or 3 times a year, always uninvited, always smiling too wide. He brought strange gifts for her, things no child would really want. A compass that never pointed north. Old wire puzzles that could not be solved. Antique coins with holes drilled through the center. He smelled of gasoline and copper. Her mother, Hannah, argued with him a lot. Lily remembered standing in the hallway one night, listening. Hannah's voice was sharp, angry. Mark's voice was calm, too calm, like he was enjoying her anger. Lily said Hannah told him to leave her alone, that she was not his to talk to. Mark only replied with words Lily never forgot. "Blood listens." After that, Lily could not sleep. The wind rattled the gate in their backyard that night, over and over, open and shut, open and shut. She stayed awake listening to it, gripping her blanket, staring at the ceiling until morning. Sarah listened carefully, each detail sinking deeper. Lily spoke about how she loved drawing mazes in chalk on their driveway. Not castles or flowers like the other kids, just endless paths winding in circles with no end. She said she liked finding the middle. Her brother, Noah, teased her for it. But she kept drawing them anyway. The night before she disappeared, Lily sat on the porch steps with her mother. Hannah's voice was distant that night, almost sad. She told Lily that she was tired of pretending to be happy. Lily remembered looking out at the woods behind their fence and seeing something strange. A flash of metal. Not an animal. Not a trick of light. Just a small reflection deep between the trees, gone before she could say anything. The next morning was picture day. Hannah curled Lily's hair, straightened her collar, and told her to smile. Noah sat on the couch, ignoring them, slamming doors like he always did. Lily said the photographer at school adjusted her collar before taking her photo. She flinched when his hand brushed her shoulder, and he stepped back in surprise. That picture, the one where her smile was small and tense, was the same one on the missing poster. After school, she went home, put on her pink sneakers, and took her chalk outside. She started drawing another maze. Her last one. She drew longer paths, deeper turns, more walls than ever before. She remembered hearing her mother call for dinner, but she wanted to finish it. She remembered her chalk pressing to the pavement, her fingers smudged white, the air growing colder, and then nothing. No sound. No pain. No scream. Just the feeling of falling asleep standing up. When Sarah asked her what happened next, Lily's eyes met hers for the first time. Her voice cracked. I woke up in the middle. What was the middle that Lily spoke of, and why did it feel like she had been there far longer than anyone knew? Sarah sat perfectly still, her pen frozen above her notebook as Lily's words hung heavy in the air. The middle. That was what Lily called it, and she said it as if it was not just a place, but a truth she carried deep inside her. Lily stared down at her folded hands and spoke slowly, her voice quiet but clear. She said she remembered waking up in a room with no windows. The walls were concrete, pale and cold, and there was only one light bulb above the door that buzzed faintly. There was a vent near the ceiling that whined softly when air passed through. Every morning, she would find food placed on a small metal tray. She never saw who brought it. Every night, she would see something strange. The maze on the wall. She told Sarah how the maze was redrawn each night. Sometimes it was different, sometimes the same, but it was always fresh, as if someone had painted over it while she slept. At first, she tried to trace it with her fingers, hoping it might lead somewhere, but it never did. She began to draw it in her mind until it was the only thing she could dream about. Sarah leaned forward, asking if she ever saw anyone. Lily's hands trembled slightly, but her voice stayed calm. She heard footsteps, always far away. She heard humming sometimes too, soft and low, almost like a lullaby. There was also a hole in the corner of her room. She never knew how deep it went. She dropped small objects into it, a screw from her bed frame, a piece of paper she tore from the tray liner, even a button. She said none of them ever made a sound when they hit the bottom. One day, she dropped a marble she had found tucked under the mattress. The next morning, it was back on her tray, perfectly clean. Sarah's chest tightened as Lily went on. She said that she started carving things into the underside of the bed, small lines and numbers she could remember. She scratched mazes with her fingernails onto the floor when she ran out of anything else. Then her voice cracked again as she looked up at Sarah and said, "It was not just me." Sarah's stomach turned. She asked what she meant. Lily's lips parted slightly, her breath shaking now for the first time. There were voices. Sometimes crying, sometimes whispering. I counted doors. Sarah's pulse quickened. Lily said she never saw them, but she knew they were close. The walls were thin enough that she could hear someone breathing when she pressed her ear against them. She said she counted every sound and marked each day with scratches until the marks filled almost half the wall. And then one night, the humming stopped. She said that was the night she heard the fire. Distant cracking, the smell of smoke coming through the vent. Then silence again. The next morning, her door was open. Sarah could barely speak. She asked her how she got out. Lily looked down and whispered, "I followed the maze." The room was silent. The fluorescent lights above hummed faintly, and Sarah felt a chill run down her arms. What was waiting for Lily at the end of that maze, and how did it lead her back after 9 long years of silence? Sarah could not shake the weight of Lily's last words. She followed the maze. That single sentence kept echoing in her mind as she pulled out the old files from the case. The cabin fire. Mark Hale's supposed death. It had been marked accidental, a case closed far too quickly. But now, Lily's return had torn it wide open. The fire had happened 5 years after Lily vanished. A hunting cabin deep in the Blue Ridge woods had burned to ash, nothing but charred beams left standing. Inside, the remains of one body were found, so badly burned it was never confirmed who it was. A melted wristwatch, a pair of boots, and the assumption that Mark Hale had died there. But Sarah now wondered if that fire had been something else. She visited the old crime scene herself. The cabin was long gone, but blackened earth and pieces of rusted metal still marked the ground where it had stood. As she walked slowly through the ash, she noticed something half buried. It was small, round, and cold to the touch. She pulled it out and turned it in her hand. A brass tag. Stamped into the metal, the number 53. Sarah's heart pounded. Lily's tag was 52. This one was different. Back at the station, Sarah laid the tag on her desk. Lily stared at it through the glass of the interview room. Her face did not change, but her fingers curled tightly against the table. She said softly, "That is one of them." Sarah asked her what she meant, and Lily spoke slowly, her words sharp and deliberate. "There were more doors. I heard numbers. I was 52. Someone else was 53. There was also 51. The room felt like it was closing in." Sarah asked if she ever saw them. Lily shook her head. "Only shadows. I knew them by their sounds. Breathing. Crying. One of them used to tap on the wall, 3 times, every night. Then one day, it stopped." Sarah felt a cold dread crawl up her spine. The detectives reviewed the case files again. Neighbors from years ago had remembered seeing a beige truck near the Bennett house around the time Lily vanished. They all agreed it belonged to Mark. One neighbor, an older man, claimed he saw it parked late at night near the woods behind their fence. Sarah pulled traffic camera records from that time. One image caught her eye. The same truck, heading north out of town toward an old forest road, 2 nights before Lily disappeared. That road was closed now, overgrown and hidden. Lily looked at the map when Sarah showed her. She placed her finger on it without hesitation. "There used to be a blue sign there, with a deer on it," she said quietly. "That was where he took me." Sarah froze. The cabin fire had been less than a mile from that same road. The evidence was lining up in ways that felt too sharp, too exact, like pieces of a puzzle that had been waiting years to be put together. But then Lily's voice dropped lower, her tone almost hollow. "Mark was not working alone." Sarah stared at her. "What do you mean?" Lily looked down at her hands. "I never saw his face. But someone else was there. He wore boots that were too heavy. His steps were different. And he smelled like bleach." Sarah felt her breath catch. A second man. Who was this second man in the shadows of Lily's memory, and how much deeper did this buried truth really go? Sarah could not ignore what Lily had said. A second man. Someone in those woods who had stayed unseen for 9 long years. She spent the night digging through old files and tracking down anyone connected to Mark Hale. That was when she found it. An old report buried deep in the archives. A social worker had once filed concerns about Hannah Bennett's childhood home. Hannah's mother had been known for strange disappearances, sometimes leaving for days or even weeks with no explanation. When she returned, neighbors claimed she seemed distant, unfocused, almost like she was not the same person who had left. Sarah met with Margaret Lane, a social worker who had worked in the area years ago. Margaret frowned when she saw Hannah's name. "I remember her mother," she said slowly. "There were whispers about that family. People said Hannah's mother took her to a property outside town, an old farmhouse in Leicester." Sarah and Margaret drove out to see it. The road was narrow, swallowed by forest on either side. When they arrived, the house stood silent and sunken into the earth, covered in ivy and rot. Its porch sagged dangerously, and its windows were shattered like open, staring eyes. Inside, the air was stale and damp. Dust coated everything, but there was one thing that stood out. In the cellar, behind a leaning shelf of broken jars, was a door. It was painted red. Sarah's hand hovered over it. There was a heavy padlock, rusted but still strong. She broke it with a crowbar, and the door creaked open. A staircase descended into darkness. The air grew colder as they stepped down, the smell of damp concrete and earth thick in their noses. At the bottom was a corridor, narrow and lined with cracked walls. At the end, a single metal door stood waiting. Painted on it, faded but still visible, was a number. 51. Sarah's heart pounded as she forced it open. The room inside was small and empty, concrete walls stained with time. A broken cot leaned in one corner, a warped mirror was bolted to the wall, and carved deep into the concrete was a maze. Its lines were sharp, desperate. At the center was a word scratched so deeply the stone had chipped away. Remember. Margaret whispered softly, almost afraid to speak. This was not just some hiding place. This was built for keeping someone inside. Sarah stepped closer to the mirror. Her reflection was faint, distorted. For a moment, it felt like another face stared back at her, one younger, frightened, almost familiar. Beneath the cot, she found a small box. Inside were old papers, photographs yellowed with age, and a single object that made her blood run cold, a pink child's shoe, no larger than Lily's would have been when she disappeared. When Sarah showed it to Lily, her hands trembled slightly. "That is not mine," Lily said, her voice thin. Sarah asked if she knew who it belonged to. Lily's eyes lowered. She whispered one name. Clara. Who was Clara, and why did her name sound like a shadow pulled from Hannah's past? When Lily spoke the name Clara, Sarah felt an unease that gripped her deeper than anything before. The way Lily said it was not just like remembering someone. It was like waking up to a memory that had always been there but buried too deep to reach. Sarah pressed gently, asking who Clara was. Lily's eyes stayed on the floor. She said Clara was another girl in the middle. Older than her. Pale, thin, with a scar across her forehead. Lily never heard her speak, but at night she would hum softly, a sound that somehow made the silence feel less unbearable. Sarah felt her chest tighten. She had heard that hum before. Hannah had hummed that same tune quietly in her holding cell when she thought no one was listening. Lily's voice dropped lower. Clara looked like my mother. The word struck like a blade. Sarah stared at her, and for a moment, she forgot how to breathe. She immediately pulled Hannah's records, combing through every document, every old note. That was when she saw it. A sealed juvenile intake form from 1994. A girl named Clara R., age 14. No surname listed. Psychological status, severe dissociation. Location, Asheville Children's Psychiatric Facility. Duration of stay, 21 months. Released to private care under state supervision. No further records. Sarah printed the file and placed it in front of Hannah during questioning. Hannah's eyes locked on it. She did not speak. Sarah's voice was steady. Clara R. That was you, was it not? Hannah's lips trembled, but she said nothing. Margaret leaned forward. Tell us about Clara. Hannah exhaled slowly. When she spoke, her voice was flat, distant, like she was reciting someone else's story. Clara was my name before they split me. That place taught us to obey. They broke us down piece by piece until nothing was left but silence. Sarah asked who they were. Hannah's answer came like a slow knife. They called it Project Hollow Seed. Sarah felt the room tilt. Hannah said they were part of an experimental program. They isolated children, erased their memories, rebuilt their minds. When the facility closed, they sent their failures back into the world. Clara became Hannah. And Mark? He was never my brother, Hannah said. He was placed in our lives to watch us. Sarah's stomach twisted. Lily stared at her mother through the glass, her face pale but calm. She said one thing softly, almost to herself. I remember her voice through the walls. Sarah leaned closer. What voice? Lily looked up, and her eyes were sharp now. Clara's. If Clara had once been Hannah, and her voice had been in those walls, then how deep did this program's roots run, and how many others were still buried inside it? The room was silent as Hannah's confession settled over everyone like a heavy fog. Sarah stared at her, her mind racing, but Hannah's voice was steady now, stripped of all emotion. Project Hollowseed never ended, she said. It only changed its name and moved to places no one would look. Sarah asked her why she never came forward. Hannah's eyes glistened, and for the first time, her voice cracked. They told me if I gave them one child, they would leave me alone forever. I believed them. The words felt like ice. Lily stood behind the glass, her face pale but unreadable. She did not cry. She only watched her mother. Sarah turned toward her and asked why she had come back after all these years. That was when Lily spoke, her voice so quiet it felt like the air leaned in to hear it. I made a promise. Sarah frowned. To who? Lily looked down at her hands, trembling now for the first time. To the girl in room 53. The station fell silent. Sarah asked if she had seen this girl. Lily nodded faintly. Her name was not really Clara, she whispered, but that is what she called herself. She was sick. Fever, coughing, nosebleeds. They stopped feeding her when she could not stand. Sarah's stomach twisted. What happened to her? Lily's voice broke. They made me dig. They told me if I helped bury her, they would let me leave. Margaret covered her mouth in shock. Sarah stepped closer. Was she already gone? Lily shook her head slowly. Not yet. The room seemed to freeze. Lily's eyes glistened now, but she kept speaking. I closed the lid. I heard her fingers tap. Before they sealed it, she opened her eyes and whispered something. Sarah felt her breath catch. What did she say? Lily looked up at her, her face hollow, empty of anything but memory. She said, "Do not let them erase me." The words cut through the silence like a blade. Sarah felt the weight of them, heavy and sharp. This was not just about Lily's escape. This was about something far darker, something that stretched beyond one family, one child, or one town. Lily's hands curled into fists. I came back to give her a name. If Lily was determined to keep that promise, then what else did she remember about the place where the doors were numbered and the walls never forgot? Sarah could not stop thinking about Lily's words. Do not let them erase me. That night, she stayed late in her office, going through every file, every report tied to Project Hollowseed. She searched state archives, sealed juvenile cases, and long-closed facilities. That was when she saw something that made her hands go cold. A document marked classified had been buried in a forgotten database. Its title was simple. Echo Seed. It listed locations, dates, and names. Children. Each one marked extracted, deceased, or unknown. At the very bottom were 3 numbers that had no status beside them. 52. 53. And 54. Her phone rang at that exact moment. A ranger from Pisgah Forest reported an unusual find. An old bunker entrance buried deep into the hillside, metal doors sealed shut with heavy rust. A number painted faintly across them. 54. Sarah drove there herself before dawn, the sky still dark, mist curling low through the trees. The ranger led her down a narrow trail to where the hillside had partially collapsed, revealing the structure. It looked like something forgotten by time. She gripped the cold metal handle and forced the doors open with a crowbar. Inside was a staircase that plunged into darkness. She descended slowly, each step echoing hollowly. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of rust and stone. At the bottom, a narrow hallway stretched forward. She followed it, her flashlight beam trembling against cracked concrete walls until she reached the end. A single door. She pushed it open and froze. The room was empty except for a table, a single chair, and a folder sitting neatly in the center. Her heart pounded as she opened it. Inside was a photograph. A young girl with braided hair, no older than 7, smiling faintly. Underneath, a date, April 12, 1981. And below that, a single word handwritten in ink. Sarah. Her breath hitched. It was her. That same small chin, that same freckle below her eye that she had never known was there until this very moment. Before she could react, the heavy metal door behind her slammed shut. It took the rescue team 3 hours to get her out. When they finally pulled her back into the daylight, she did not scream or fight. She simply clutched the photo in her hands, her face pale, her eyes hollow, as though she had left part of herself down there in that dark corridor. Lily was already waiting at the station when Sarah returned. She saw the photo in Sarah's hands and said quietly, "You remembered too." If Sarah herself was part of the program, then how many lives had been shaped by this forgotten experiment, and how many of them were still walking among the living without knowing what had been done to them? Sarah sat alone in her office long after midnight, the photograph still in her hand. The truth was no longer just about Lily. It was about her too. Project Hollow Seed had reached into every corner of their lives, shaping them without their knowledge, and leaving scars that no one could see. The investigation confirmed everything. Hannah confessed in full. She admitted that she had been part of the program as a child, fractured into pieces they could control, given a new name, and placed back into the world. Mark was not her brother at all. He had been assigned to her family to keep watch. When the program started again, they approached her with a choice. If she offered them one child, she would never be touched again. Hannah chose survival over her own daughter. Her voice cracked when she admitted it, but she never once denied it. She pled guilty to conspiracy and obstruction and accepted her sentence without protest, as if she had already been living in a prison long before she ever stepped into one. Lily stayed quiet through it all. She never raised her voice, never shed tears. When Sarah asked her what she wanted now, she simply said she wanted to leave. 6 weeks later, she did. Lily sold what little she owned, withdrew her savings, and disappeared from Blue Ridge. No one knew where she went. Sarah received a letter one morning, no return address. Inside was a single folded paper. A hand-drawn maze. At the center, instead of a circle or a number, there was a small window drawn open. Beneath it, in Lily's handwriting, were 4 words. "Sometimes surviving is enough." Sarah stared at it for a long time. She pinned it to her wall. Margaret started a program for survivors of long-term captivity, naming it Room 53 in quiet tribute to the girl whose promise Lily kept. Tommy Bennett, Lily's brother, returned to college and wrote a thesis he titled The Geometry of Memory. Few understood it, but those who read it cried. And Sarah? She resigned. Not because she gave up, but because she was tired of chasing ghosts who lived inside her own skin. She moved out of town, carrying only the photograph of herself as a child. She would never know the full truth of who put her there, or why, but for the first time, she no longer needed every answer. As for Lily, there were whispers months later. A woman working quietly at a community center in a small town far away. She read to children who stayed silent in classrooms. She drew mazes for them and told them it was all right if they never found an ending because sometimes the path itself was the point. One day, a little girl asked her what the strange symbol in the middle of her mazes meant. The circle with a slash through it. Lily smiled softly, bent down, and whispered. "It means you are not lost. It means you are still finding your way. If you are still watching this story, it means this journey has held you the way it held me," and the girl believed her. Because her voice did not shake. Because her eyes did not lie. Because she was a survivor who knew how to leave the door open behind her for anyone who needed to follow. That means this story deserves your like and your subscribe. Please help me reach 1,000 likes because this is a promise I made to my mother, and I want to keep it with your support. Tell me in the comments, from which city are you watching this story?